Elon Musk has some strong feelings about whether Congress should pass another stimulus bill in order to provide economic relief to both companies and to average Americans. And so through a Twitter thread, he argued that another government stimulus package is not in the best interests of the people, in my opinion. Oh, fascinating. Okay, that's great. So he continues. I want to be fair. I'm going to give you all of the tweets in this thread so all of the Elon Musk stans don't have a temper tantrum with me. He also says, as a reminder, I'm in favor of universal basic income. Goal of government should be to maximize the happiness of the people. Giving each person money allows them to decide what meets their needs rather than the blunt tool of legislation, which creates self-serving special interests. He also says these are jammed to gills with special interest earmarks. It's fascinating that he's complaining about that. And he also says if we do a stimulus at all, it should just be direct payments to consumers. Now, look, this is a small thing, but I have to mention that his use of the word consumers is important when you want to understand why people like him and why a lot of these Silicon Valley CEOs love the idea of universal basic income, because they see the working class as consumers. And in order for them to stay afloat, consumers need money. But at the same time, they often also advocate for gutting the social safety net, right? So Medicaid, for instance, or Social Security. And they want to simplify everything by maybe handing everybody $1,000 a month or whatever the number is, with the hope that that'll keep people satisfied enough so they don't riot. But anyway, let me tell you why I have a problem with this argument, because the way that he has presented it might seem awesome on the surface, but in reality, these stimulus bills aren't just about giving money to corporations or giving money to average citizens. We were clear in our criticisms about previous stimulus bills. I did not like the fact that there was a lack of transparency when it came to the $500 billion that Steve Mnuchin could hand out to all his corporate buddies. I do not agree with the Federal Reserve printing money and bailing out big banks who then turn around and refuse refinancing to average Americans who are looking to tap into lower interest rates. So there's a lot of criticism to go around. But the stimulus bill actually provides funding for all sorts of things that we desperately need, including funding for hospitals, funding for desperately needed PPE for these hospitals. Even the Republican draft for the upcoming stimulus bill provided some funding for mental health care and suicide prevention, which is incredibly important right now, considering how many people are suffering from anxiety, depression, and, people have committed suicide in the middle of this pandemic. It's a serious problem. Also, it includes assistance for small businesses, or at least it's supposed to include relief for small businesses. And that's important because there are people who have spent their entire lives building their small business, whether it's a hair salon or a restaurant, and they have been negatively impacted by this, and they're likely to lose everything unless Congress acts. So to just simply say I don't agree with the stimulus bill, I think it's all about earmarks, I think is ridiculous, because that's not really the case. But if you have nuanced criticisms, I would love to hear it.
So the folks who say small government is what we need, really? That's so unsophisticated. Small government for what? What's the project? So if you say, who's for small government? Progressives who want to defund the police, right? That is smaller government. Progressives are in favor of smaller government because we don't want endless wars in the Middle East or all over the world. What is the job at hand? So if we're trying to rebuild the energy infrastructure of this country, then we need a big government. Or when Eisenhower, both in World War II and building the highway system in this country, needed big government. Sometimes you need big government, sometimes you need small government. And what you always need is a brain to figure out which is which. So these simplistic ways of looking at it are unsophisticated, to say the least. And it's disappointing to see Elon Musk, who's very smart in other ways, be this politically obtuse, let alone hypocritical. So when he says in that tweet, legislation is a blunt instrument, universal basic income would also need to be legislation. So that doesn't make any sense at all. The question is, what should be in the legislation? So are we concerned about special interests? There's literally no one in the country who's more worried about special interests than we are. I started a whole pack called Wolf Pack to get money out of politics because these guys are picking us apart, and all the politicians serve them. But that doesn't mean you should never pass any legislation to help Americans. Please, for God's sake, use your brain. Now let's get to his hypocrisy.
So, of course, he's a hypocrite because he's received so much in government stimulus in order to launch his businesses, his multiple businesses. But there was a story out of Buffalo, New York, that really caught my attention. I want to share the details of it with you. It was written in 2019. And the headline is, Tesla's Buffalo plant gets $884 million write-down. What does that mean? Well, it turns out that the state of New York actually offered Tesla a giant amount of money to build its plant. And then later, that plant was appraised. And let me give you the details on what the appraisal indicated. New York State spent $958.6 million to build Tesla's solar panel factory in South Buffalo and buy a big chunk of the equipment inside. Now, auditors are saying the building and all that equipment is worth just under $75 million, or just 8% of what the state put into the Riverbend factory. But we're not done, it gets worse. In a series of contract revisions, the state dropped the provision included in earlier agreements that mandated the creation of another 1,440 jobs at suppliers and service providers, effectively cutting the job impact from the state's $959 million investment in half. Hopes that the project would spur the creation of a solar energy research hub in Buffalo and Rochester also failed to pan out. The agreement also failed to set any type of pay standards for the Riverbend jobs. For nearly $1 billion in taxpayer subsidies, it certainly would have been reasonable for the state to insist that the factory's jobs pay well, maybe mandating that 80% of the positions pay at least 33% above the area's median wage, or around $59,000 a year. Instead, Tesla's entry-level wage is around $16 an hour, or around $33,000 a year. Oof! Sounds like a great investment. Good job, state of New York. I mean, just absolute garbage. I have no interest hearing any political commentary from people like Elon Musk, people who have milked the system for their own advantage, and then they turn around in a moment of crisis when people need economic relief to argue that maybe a stimulus bill doesn't make any sense. Maybe we can give the monkeys some peanuts and they'll shut up and they won't complain anymore. You know, because we need consumers, of course. Yeah. I have more, but go ahead, Cenk.
So, look, we did a fun poll on another TYT show. Elon Musk, yes or no? You can vote at tyt.com/polls/Elon, or you do just /polls and you'll get all of them. There they are. So right now, no is winning 70-30. Okay. I actually voted yes. And so I think Elon Musk is a complicated, interesting character. I think that too many people buttonhole him, and so I think he's wrong about this. And I want to be clear. So New York made a major mistake in giving $1 billion, not $1 million, $1 billion to that project, and it was money that was wasted. So that's big government that didn't work. But the federal government gave less money to Tesla, but at a time that they desperately needed it in 2008, and that did work. So at that time, they'd given Tesla $465 million, and Tesla paid that loan back. The government made interest on it, and it wound up helping create a car company that is getting off of fossil fuels. On the issue of subsidies and earmarks for special interests, Elon Musk, who is a complicated and interesting person, deserves a tall glass of shut-up juice. After taking billions of dollars in subsidies, you don't get to talk about subsidies when it goes to other people. Now, I mean, if you wanted to give full context in that tweet and say, oh, by the way, I've taken $1 billion from New York, I've taken $500 million from the federal government, I've paid some of it back, I didn't tell others were a disaster. Sorry, taxpayers, I totally screwed you on that. I mean, I can't begin to tell you how much I screwed you on that. okay, but in this case, I think these particular subsidies are wrong. Well, that's an interesting nuanced position that he would have. So, I'm against subsidies, man. I don't like legislation. Proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that you could be really smart in some areas and a total moron in others.
Elon Musk's, businesses have received a total of $4.9 billion in government subsidies. So, Cenk, you mentioned the $465 million that Tesla received from the Obama administration in 2009. But overall, Elon Musk's growing empire is fueled by $4.9 billion in government subsidies.
Look, in the post game, I want to give you guys even more context, because the federal government actually spent a lot of money on promoting green energy. Did it work? I'm going to give you the numbers. The numbers are actually really interesting and a little surprising. So I was surprised by them. So the post games for the members, tyt.com/join, or if you're watching on YouTube, you can just hit the join button underneath. Make sure you get at least a $4.99 level so you can get the post games, because that's a really important lesson for all of us to learn. It's not just about Elon Musk. It's about what the government can and can't do. So we'll talk about it for the members.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.